as Blaise Pascal, the French scientist, said, all of man's troubles stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone. All you have to do is learn how to sit quietly in a room alone to access this highest level of pure awareness that is there. And when you access it, you begin to discover that you're not alone. Meditation, going within, leaving the chatter level of your mind and going deep within, what it does is it shatters the illusion of your separateness. You begin to realize that you're connected. The connection is not physical. The connection is metaphysical. The connection is not in form. The connection is transform, beyond form. When you get that, and you go to this level, first when you start this, you discover how slimy your mind really is. And you find yourself thinking these endless thoughts and millions of them, and they go on and on and on, and you just sit there and you say, what is this? I'm not doing anything, and I'm thinking, and now I'm thinking about how stupid I am sitting here thinking, and nothing is happening, and you go through this doubt. You see, doubt is the way most of us have learned almost all the things that we learn. We don't learn from knowing. We don't learn from knowing, we learn from doubt. And so when you learn from doubt, at the quantum level, doubt affects what you are doubting. Doubt affects the observation of an object. The introduction of doubt in that observational process at the quantum level affects what you're observing. So if you can't get to knowing, like you know you can still skate, or you know you can swim, or you know you can ride a bicycle, if you can't get to that level in spiritual awareness or higher consciousness, or in manifesting abundance for yourself, or in creating fulfillment for yourself, or in healing yourself, if you can't get to the knowing level, then what you're working on is doubt. And if you maintain the doubt itself will interfere, because we're talking about now something that is not visible. It is invisible. It is beyond form. And doubt is right in there with it. So the doubt, the knowing, the surrendering, it's like when Deepak and I decided to do this together today, and whenever I come up on stage or when I write, I have this process that I go through I call surrendering. And you just get to a point where you know that you're not alone. That you have divine, invisible guidance available for you, and you go to this place and you do all that you know how to do in the world of form, and then it's like this magical, it's almost like you put all of the worries and the doubts and the fears and the anxiety and the stress and the wondering, all of that stuff, you just put it in a balloon. And you just blow it up and you tie it. And then you let it go. And you watch all of that stuff go away. And you say, I will allow the God within me, the invisible organizing intelligence that has organized me with a brain that is capable of remembering things that happened to me 20 years ago, even though I had a different brain then. I will allow that magnificent organizing intelligence that is somehow outside of my physicalness and inside it at the same time to take over. And whatever then comes my way, in the way of difficulties, in the way of problems, in the way of struggles, I will view, instead of as they shouldn't be happening, I will view as lessons, as opportunities, as something for me to learn, as reminders of the spiritual being that I can become. I will not treat it as, why is this happening to me? Because I know now that my life is nothing more than a parenthesis in eternity. It started in a moment, it was born in a night, to perish in a night, when the soul slept in beams of light endlessly. And I trust that intelligence. I wonder how many of you know that in the world of highest awareness, nothing is impossible.
The 100th Monkey is a philosophy based upon the writing of a man named Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake lives in England, and he has written a book, which I've been studying, called A New Science of Life. And it was voted by the American Academy of Physics as the book most likely to be burned by their academy. All right? Because it is so blasphemous and absurd and silly, the notions inside of it. What Rupert Sheldrake is suggesting is that memory, which is what we can recall of all the things that have happened to us, is simply not stored in the brain. It's just not stored in the brain. All kinds of physical evidence to, like where they do experiments with cutting out pieces of the brain, a lot of ways of scientific evidence of establishing this belief. Just let it in. Don't endorse it, just let it in. Don't bite off my finger. Just look to where it's pointing for a few minutes, okay? The notion is that if memory, of course, is not stored in our brain, then where is it? Right? The philosophy is very simple, that all members of a species are connected together through what they call morphogenetic fields, just very much like magnets. And these fields surround all human beings. The 100th monkey is the number. The 100th monkey. Off the coast of Japan, there's an island. And they took a group of these monkeys from one species, and they put sweet potatoes out there on the beach. And they watched the monkeys. And the monkeys began to wash the sweet potatoes in a certain way that was peculiar to this species. And they began to eat them in a way that was peculiar to this species. After a given amount of time, when a certain number of monkeys within that species began to do that, the same behavior began to crop up in monkeys of the same species on islands 200 and 300 miles away. The question is, how did it happen? How could that have happened? And that's, without going into all the details of that, if there is truth that all members of a species are connected, that all human beings are connected as well. And if all of us are connected in some way that we don't understand, but in fact are connected, then I'm not here to tell you that you have to be thinking positive thoughts because it'll improve your life. I'm here to tell you that you have an obligation because you could be depressing somebody in Uruguay right now by thinking negative thoughts. It's true. Now just think about it. Just let it in. The highest form of ignorance is to reject something you know nothing about. That's the highest form you can get to. We know so little about this whole idea. But what we do know is that when human beings begin to think in positive, healthy ways, that they reduce certain endorphins into the chemistry of your blood. This is from Anatomy of an Illness, Norman Cousins. And that when you think positive, happy, loving, laughing thoughts, there's a different chemistry that goes into your body than when you think depressing, negative, anguishing, despairing thoughts. And that thinking the way that you decide to think has a dramatic effect on your chemistry and on your physiology and on your health as a human being. And that we know that when they did the artificial heart transplants, when they were looking for all the people up in Kentucky, who they were going to pick, there were many, many volunteers because a lot of these people only have a few weeks left to live. So if they could get a few more months, they were very willing to be experimented. The number one criteria was the will to live. What kind of an attitude does this human being have? How do they think? Because we do not want somebody who gives up on life, who is going to feel bad, who is going to be telling himself that he shouldn't be in this position. So as you begin to think about the possibility, here's what Ken Kais did in The 100th Monkey. He said, and The 100th Monkey is about nothing I've said so far. That's just all what I learned through my own research and my own reading and so on. The 100th Monkey is a book about nuclear war. The belief is this: if enough people on our planet think there's going to be a nuclear holocaust and believe that it's going to happen, we are going to create it by the way that we think. When a critical mass, and that's the theory, the 100th monkey, when you get to a certain number of people thinking anything, then it begins to spread to the rest of us all over our planet, and we begin to act upon those collective thoughts. The thinking is, who knows, I'm open to it, that we are not only connected to everybody who's alive, but everybody who ever has been, and everybody who ever will be. That we may all in some way be connected. So that if we want, the number one thing in the Hunger Project is that we are trying to raise the consciousness of the world, to help people to understand that starvation is something we cannot tolerate any longer. We won't have it. We won't think of it as something that is inevitable. What is happening now is people are beginning to say, what can I do? How can I change that? The same thing is true with nuclear war. If you want to think about raising your children, my friends, what more important parental task do you have than to make sure that our world is a place that's going to be inhabitable for our children and our grandchildren? As Victor Hugo said, there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And we can make any idea have its time come by collectively thinking in these ways. And imagine that we're all connected like this. Imagine.
There is a world beyond the world of the changing. Beyond the world of the changing. So that the world of the changing, when Lao Tzu, the great ancient founder of the Tao, back in the 5th century BC, the founder of Taoism, a beautiful sort of philosophy which is all summarized in about 83 pages. It's great. All right? You can read it in an afternoon. And Lao Tzu was asked the question, what is real, Master? What is real? And his response was, that is real, which never changes. So almost as if you have to look at your own life and your own self, and you have to ask the question, what part of me meets that criteria? What part of me says, I am eternal? I have always been. What part of you has never changed? I don't know about you, but it's not my body. I promise you that. My body has undergone dramatic changes, but there's inside of this body, there is a witness. And this witness is noticing and observing and has never aged or never changed. Lao Tzu said the second thing that historically everyone has believed in is that we are connected to that world that is never changing. That it is a part of us. We live with it. It's within us. Everything that we see in the physical world is changing. I was giving a talk not too long ago in Baltimore, and I was sitting just jotting down a few things that I wanted to talk about that evening, and there was a mirrored wall right next to me. The whole wall was mirrored. And I was feeling really great. I had just run about 10 miles, and I was just feeling really up and terrific, and I had a nice big audience coming that night, and everything was just really great. And I looked up over at the wall, and then I looked down again, and then I looked again real fast. Have you ever done that, where you look in the mirror and you say, who is that in there? And I looked down, and I looked in again. And then I stopped, and I put my pen down, and I started staring at this face that was looking back at me. And I said, there's an old man in there renting my face. That's not me. You see, the part of me that is in here, that has been watching this, that has been observing this, that has been noticing this, has never aged and never does. It never can. I remember one time I was out running when we were on the road, and my wife was with me, and I'd been running for a couple of hours and early in the morning, and it was a real beautiful, crisp morning, and she waved at me, and she said, come on, we're going to have breakfast or something, and I stopped running, and I ran across this field,
and there was a fence. The fence was about this high. And I ran up to the fence, and I hurled over the fence. I just jumped over the fence. And she looked at me, she said, "You can't do that." I said, "Do what?" She said, "You're 56 years old. You don't jump over fences when you're 56 years old. You could kill yourself." I said, "I forgot." And the part of me that's in here, that's noticing, that's watching, and the part of you that's in you, watching, things are falling. You've noticed that, right? Things are wrinkling. Things are turning gray. There's a process of shifting and changing. But there's a world beyond that. And all of these great teachers speak to that world, the world that is beyond the world of the changing. And it's almost as if we have to begin to know that world. There's a famous poem by Emily Dickinson, who's one of the people I wrote about in Wisdom of the Ages. Emily Dickinson, who 19th century poet, lived up in Massachusetts. Brilliant lady, wrote thousands of poems. A lot of them were about higher awareness and higher consciousness. In a very simple language. She said, imagine holding up a handful of dust or dirt. She said, "This quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing and frocks and curls. This passive place, a summer's nimble mansion where bloom and bees fulfilled their oriental circuit, then ceased like these. This quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing and frocks and curls." It's all quiet dust, all of it. And it's all in a state of change. And who we are is not that dust. And that's what the poets and the philosophers and the great teachers have come to tell us about and risk their lives to tell us, that there's something more to it. You all, when you go to the physician and you get a blood test, and they'll come back and they'll tell you about your iron count. There's a finite supply of iron on the planet. Just so much iron. Some of it's flowing through your veins. The question, the eternal question, is where was that iron that's flowing through your vein before you showed up here? And where will it be when you leave? Because who you are is not that which is that material, but who you are is that quiet observer in there. And this is called, for want of a better term, it's called the world of the soul.
You see, when I resonate to anger, shame, hatred, or revenge, I add to these decidedly non-spiritual energies by joining in what I find to be so objectionable. But when I remember to bring non-judgment, love, tolerance, and compassion to these low, ego-dominated energies, I see how different the world looks, and even how different those around me act in the presence of these God-realized energies. I feel optimistic when I'm in spirit, with an inner knowing that nothing can interfere with an idea whose time is coming or has already arrived. I trust that our Creator knows what it's doing and that good triumphs over what ego believes is bad or evil. I sense that we're all moving toward a world that will no longer know the horrors of war or practice our long-established habits of inhumanity toward our brothers and sisters around the globe, who may have different cultural views and their own unique physical distinctiveness. By staying in spirit, I'm truly inspired to see the potential for greatness that's in all of us as one people, and I turn from anguish to faith that at least I can live from a place of God realization and practice being a force for good. Staying in vibrational alignment with spirit allows me to be more present in all of my life activities. Arriving seems to replace striving, and being in a state of flow is far more common than my old, uninspired state of worry and anguish. I remind myself that spirit is only here and now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, only now. By keeping my vibration aligned spiritually, I see the ecstasy in the present. Everything else that once was a source of worry doesn't come up for me, since the outcomes are already handled for me in my own mind. What will be, I remind myself. The world looks so much more peaceful when I approach it this way, and my ego, which once needed to win at all costs,
is relegated to a distant seat in a stadium in another galaxy. The laws of the material world truly do not apply in the presence of God realization. And I know that I have the choice to live at this level of inspiration. When I do so, it seems that the world changes. Animals behave differently than their biological genetics would seem to allow. People at a distance seem to hear me telepathically and respond to my highest thoughts. Objects seem to materialize in defiance of what scientists say is possible. And healing takes place in spite of modern medicine saying otherwise. In other words, miracles seem to be ordinary. The world looks like a place where everything is possible, where restrictions and limitations are non-existent, and where the power of our Creator seems to roll right up and land at my feet, begging me to hop on board and witness the infinite possibilities it offers. This is how I feel when I align myself to Spirit, cocky inside because I know something that so few ever come to realize, but humble and awestruck on the outside at the miraculousness of it all. When I remember to stay in Spirit, I've realized that when one thing appears to be going wrong, I can see clearly that 10 things are going right. For example, if my cell phone isn't working, I can note that my health is fine, my family is safe, the ocean is calm for swimming, my bank account has a surplus, my electricity is fully functional, and so on, and on it goes. From a perspective of being in Spirit, I automatically shift my attention away from what's going wrong and onto what's right. This then becomes my point of attraction, and I attract more of what I'm focused on, whereas at an earlier time in my life, I'd attract more of what was going wrong because that was my point of attraction. How sublimely beautiful the world now looks to me from this magnificent place of inspiration. No longer do I stay focused on and attract more of what's going wrong, for I've learned to place my attention on what's right, what's working, and what's aligned with the all-creating Spirit. From this place of inspiration, I ask, what if I look deep within myself and found no original sin at all? That is, what if I discovered original innocence instead? What if the same were true for everyone? I know that our creative source is one of good, and I also know that we must be like what we came from. Therefore, everyone, including myself, is a piece of God. We came to this world from innocence and love, not from a place of sin or weakness. When I see Christ consciousness in everyone, even those with whom I differ greatly, I'm able to feel good, to feel God. When I know that there's no original sin in anyone, I'm able to think like Mother Teresa, who told the world, in each person I see the face of Christ in one of his most distressing disguises. When it is goodness that I look for, rather than sin and weakness, that's what I see. I then see goodness in the little old lady driving slowly in front of me, the elderly man fumbling with his change and delaying me at the cashier, the children squealing loudly as I'm attempting to concentrate on a book, the teenagers shouting along with their ear-splitting rap music, or the jackhammer operator whose deafening sounds fill the air with chaos. When I'm inspired, I see God realization, disguised as a minor blip, and the world looks fine, happy, and even peaceful. I remind myself of Rumi's sage advice, if you're irritated by every rub, how will you ever be polished? When I feel inspired, I notice how much zest I have for life and everything that I do. I play tennis with exuberance and without fatigue. I write from my heart, and this inner feeling radiates outward in all of my waking moments. Inspiration means doing what I love, and even more significantly, loving what I'm doing. It's my willingness to bring love and passion to the activities of my life, rather than looking for love to emerge from those events and activities. It's an attitude, and knowing this, I remember to pick a good one as often as possible. I know that being enthusiastic feels good, and I also know that I have the choice to select these attitudes at any and all times. By staying in Spirit, these outlooks on life become second nature to me.
I always said there's 3 ways to enlightenment. The first way to enlightenment, I call enlightenment through suffering. And enlightenment through suffering is I am going to go through this experience. I can think of it from drinking, for example. And then I'm going to get through it, and then I'm going to look back on it. And as I look back on it, I'm going to realize after 10 years or so the benefit that I had in that, and I am going to grow from having suffered. It's enlightenment through suffering, which is not anything I recommend, but it's mostly the way that most people take. So we go through these storms and all of these difficulties and all of the stuff that we have to go through, and then we get to a place where we look back on it and we say, now I know why I had to go through that. You know? Now I know why I went through those addictions. Now I know why I went through those horrible relationship things, and I was always trying to be right and not being able to work it out. Now I know why I had to go through the poverty. And now I know why the accident came about. Now I know why the fire that destroyed this. I know why the illness came about. But I don't do it by what I call enlightenment through suffering any longer. I go a different direction now. And the direction that I go is the next level of enlightenment. And the next level of enlightenment is, while you are going through the storm, instead of saying, someday I will realize why I had to go through this, and I'll look back on it, and I will benefit from it. Instead of that, what I do is say, what's the lesson in this for me right now? What is it that I've attracted? Why have I attracted this into my life again? And I am going to get the lesson without having to go through a long period of suffering in order to understand it and explain it. So that's the second level, and that's one I would recommend to you as you start coming back to your place of origin, as you begin to reconnect to your source. I think that there is a way, there is a possibility of going through the things that we are told we're supposed to suffer from and not suffer at all. I think there's a way. I don't say that I'm there. And when you really get good at getting into the moment and being here now, as Ram Dass says, living from this moment and being just completely engulfed in it, whatever it is that your pain is, whatever you're thinking about, whatever, you know, there's a saying that says, I'm an old man and I've had many troubles, most of which have never happened. And most of the troubles and the suffering and the things that they are really thoughts, that all this suffering that you went through, you know, that it was all thoughts. It was just all thought. That we become what we think about, whether we want it or not. I mean, that's really the beauty of the work of Esther and Jerry Hicks and Abraham, is the power of our thoughts. This whole idea of reconfiguring our way of processing things in such a way that we don't have to suffer. Because I'm going to go to a third point. I haven't even gotten to the third one yet. Everybody has a story. Everybody has something that that takes place that they wish hadn't taken place. We still have within us the capacity, as Abraham often says, you know, my not eating because there are children starving in Africa is not going to feed one child. My feeling guilty, like you can't get depressed enough to undepress another person. You can't get sad enough to make somebody else happy. But you can present yourself as a person who is aligned with Source in such a way that you are a God-realized soul, that when you are around a depressed person or a starving person, you give them hope. And that's what we need, is people who have a sense of hope and can elevate themselves because of the examples. The third way to enlightenment, and that is what I call enlightenment by getting out in front of it and stopping it before it gets to you, anticipating it. As you get to a level of awareness that is so aligned with God, where you're thinking from a spiritual way at all times, seeing the unfolding of God, practicing reverence for life, the things I'll be speaking about when I speak about this meaning phase. As you get and begin to start to elevate your consciousness, what happens as you begin to elevate this, your intuitive nature begins to take over, and you begin to attract the right people and the right events and the right circumstances in your life. They just show up. And the right people, like when I decided to give up alcohol, when I decided to give up experimenting with certain drugs in my life, I remember still being tempted to go back to it. But as I was changing my conception of who I am, my concept of myself as a person, I would attempt to go back. I would find that the person that I was supposed to get the drugs from didn't show up. That it was like there was one more obstacle put between me and getting it, something that I didn't want to have anymore. Because addiction is nothing more than you never get enough of what you don't want. You never get enough of what you despise. And instead of my just going and making it easier, there'd be one more step, and then there'd be another step, and then I'd have to pause. And before you know it, it would be over. The temptation would be gone. And the right people would begin to show up. That's an extreme example. So now you can see it coming. And you get out in front of these things that used to cause you suffering, that you used to have to deal with in the present moment. And now, when they're on their way, you can deflect them. You can make them go away.